In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Bryan Frye, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbartis, Natan Lutz, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights to the Retro Movie Roundtable, where we watch movies and then talk about them. I am your host, Bryan Frye. Joining me today is my good friend and co-host, Natan Lutz. How are you doing, Nathan?
I'm doing great. I am currently out in the Philadelphia area this week for a brass concert that I'm going to be playing this weekend. We're still doing outdoor concerts in the main and rehearsing outdoors and all that sort of thing, but while the weather's warm, can get people together, we can do music in person. It's great.
So off mic, we were talking about some trying people around the world. Are you being tried by the Philadelphians?
Honestly, the main bit of shock for me is the different level of, let's say, confrontationalness of the musicians here, where, people in Pittsburgh are very laid back. We have a slower approach to the world by comparison. You get to Philadelphia and they're like, that 150 beat per minute tempo that you maybe slightly undercut there, we want it to be like 160 at least.
Yeah, but I've basically been in nearly more fights on Carson Street than anywhere else in the continental U.S. So I haven't fully digested the chill nature of Pittsburgh yet. Also joining us today from the Flick Chicks podcast, we have Jane Moore. Jane, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm kicking it here in Joplin, Missouri. So you could say I'm having a good time, I guess.
Excellent. And where have you met the most trying people?
Ooh, the most trying people. Probably Joplin, Missouri.
Joplin, Missouri.
They don't wear masks, and they refuse to, and they get angry when you ask them to.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Joplin, Missouri. All right. So, Jane, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Flick Chicks podcast?
Yeah, it's super fun. I co-host it with my best friend from undergrad, Allison Dodge. She has a degree in theater, and I have a degree in psych, so I think put that together and you get movies. We're two very opinionated young women that talk about any movie ever. We have no boundaries, so new, old, anything. We've even done a movie that doesn't have a Wikipedia article. I'm surprised it took us so long to get to one, though. It's Adventures in the Sin Bin, starring Bo Burnham whenever he was 20.
When was that made?
It was made in 2010, so he would have been 20 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so really young. It's surprisingly non-problematic. We really thought it was going to be, but it was not. It was kind of sweet. We really love to roast Wikipedia articles because sometimes they're pretty ridiculous, and sometimes they're kind of sweet, like really tenderly written, which is kind of nice to read about. And every episode has to be marked as explicit because we curse like sailors. So, if you're into opinionated women who curse and talk about movies, there you go.
I will be fully honest on this. It is the one thing that Russell has drawn a hard line on, and it is the one thing that I struggle with the most. For sure.
I've been listening to your ones, and I was like, okay, Jane, you can't curse.
I cuss like a sailor. It's vocabulary for me. I do have a pretty good switch. I've got a 1-year-old, so I've got to. But I've got a pretty good switch. I never cursed around my younger brother either. Mm-hmm. But man, it's just when you get fired up about something, I tend to let fly.
One of these days we need to somehow figure out how to prank Russell by teaching his son how to curse and just to run in and bomb podcasts in the middle of things. That would be fantastic.
Just a straight out of Meet the Fockers, and he, just kid runs in and, where did you learn that? It's actually one of my favorite parts of Avengers Endgame where the daughter says, he's like, no, that's mommy's word. She invented it and only she uses it.
Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So I definitely plan on using that at some point. So today we're talking about Psycho.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask, we'll start with Nathan. What is your favorite movie scream? As in, I actually yelled at the screen.
I'm going to have to jump over to a TV show here because I feel like I don't usually get that reaction in a movie theater. I'm one of these people who, when he's around people in a movie theater, I don't get too vocal about things. But, you know, if I'm completely alone, if I'm completely in a dark room watching, for example, the Netflix horror show Haunting of Hill House, there were a couple of moments in that show, especially
the car scene?
The car scene where she jumps out from between the sisters. That was a masterpiece of a jump scare.
Yeah.
Okay. Jane, what do you got?
So one, I haven't seen it in theaters because it was made in the 80s, but every time I see it, I definitely get a vocal response, and it's more, not like really a scream, but more of a like, ah! And it's Sleepaway Camp, which is the room of horror movies. It's a terrible movie. It's horrible. I love it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Best kind.
Yeah. Or the scene in Hereditary where Toni Collette's like floating up in the corner in the theaters. I was like, oh my God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mine would be, so mine was actually a laugh in a scary movie. And I love telling this story because it was I basically had a room full of people turn around and look at me like I was a psychopath. It was during the first Final Destination movie.
Oh no!
And it's where the girlfriend is going off on her boyfriend. She's like, if you want to just stick around this town and beat up so and so your whole life, then you can just drop dead. And a bus hits her like right as she says drop dead. I laughed so hard out loud, like a cackle. Like, it was so funny to me. Like, it was supposed to be startling, and I to this day I still find it funny. And I mean, even the people I was with did a slow head turn at me like, dude, are you all right? And I'm like, but that was it was great. That was it's still to this day one of my favorite horror movies because it drug that out of me. Like, it was, I had no choice but to laugh at that. There was no, like, it's not like a sneeze you're holding back. It was like that had to happen.
Yeah.
And the reaction too was just great. All right. So Nathan, I'm curious, what is the first movie you owned? And I'm gonna clarify. I feel like you get a lot of movies when you're a kid, but what's the first movie you purchased?
The first movie I personally purchased, I think, was The Incredibles, which was a movie I was a big fan of when I was a kid.
Jane, what do you got?
I think the first movie I bought was the film Secret Window, starring Johnny Depp. He was like my childhood crush, so had a lot of fond feelings, and I bought that for myself because it was based on a Stephen King novella, and it's interesting.
That was all right. So Johnny Depp, I actually have read the story.
Yeah.
It was in one of his short story collections,
like different season.
Half Past Midnight.
Half Past Midnight. Yeah.
Okay. So yes, I've read that book, but I don't know if I vaguely remember the movie. I probably did see it, and I believe the ending of it was grossly different than the ending of the book.
Really?
I feel like I had an issue with it. However, also in that book was the story The Langoliers, which was also a movie that I believe was a television, like straight to TV movie, and it was horribly awesome. Just dreadfully great. So, my first purchased movie, I can't swear to this, but I feel like it was a VHS of Pauly Shore's Biodome.
Ooh.
I have this vague recollection of being up at my grandparents' house and going to the local video rental store. For all of you post 2000 people,
Zoomers.
That's where you went to rent your that's where you went to rent your movies back then. But anyway, they had a sale on a bunch of their old used videos, and I think that was one of them. So I'll cop to it. I thought that movie was funny. So today we are doing Psycho, released in 1960. It grossed $32 million, which I just feel like that's big kudos for that. It ranked number 2 in the box office. The only thing that placed ahead of it was Swiss Family Robinson. The one right behind it was Spartacus, so that's a good company to be in. Swiss Family was number 1 that year. IMDb rating on this was 8.5. And critics meter was 96 Rotten Tomatoes, audience 95. So everybody's loving themselves some Psycho. How did we feel about it? Like early, not star ranking, but tell me about your first watch, Jane.
So it's an interesting story. So my mom has really good movie taste. But at one point, probably when I was like about 9, I was watching the masterpiece, I should say, Looney Tunes Back in Action, starring Brendan Fraser. Incredible. There's a great homage in that film where Bugs Bunny does the entire Psycho shower scene pretty much in its entirety. It's even down to the eye thing. It's hilarious. And I thought it was so funny, but my mom was like, "Do you understand the reference?" And I was like, "No." So she showed me Psycho, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome." So it became probably my sick movie. Like, whenever I was homesick, I would watch it. My mom wasn't too big on the censorship, so I appreciate that. I got to see a lot of good movies really early.
Now, I don't know if you guys suffered from this, and tell me, your personal stories. I got hit heavily with censorship as a kid. I remember my folks taking the movie The Matrix away from me.
Whoa.
And this was as like a teenager. And I remember my dad, I think, watched it months later, and he walked in and he just handed it back to me and he goes, "That was an awesome movie." And I was like, "I know, right?" So I don't know. You said your parents weren't big on it. Nathan, what did you get hit with? What were your restrictions?
I grew up in sort of a funky way in which my 2 siblings are 7 and 8 years older than I am. So
my brother's 11 years older than
me and went ahead and ran interference. So that Matrix movie that you're talking about, that was definitely my first R-rated movie. And I don't know exactly when that was, but I was pretty young, and I distinctly remember realizing my brother was watching some cool movie down in the basement. And just cracking the door open and sneaking down and then exchanging a look of, "Yeah, okay, you can stay here. I won't say anything." And it was great.
So my brother's 10 years younger than I am, so I was definitely the guy breaking through walls. I do remember one time where he called me up. I had left all of my VHS collection at home when I went to college, and I remember him calling me and being like, "Hey, have you watched Wild Things?"
Oh my God, no!
And I was like, "Yes, Ben, you're watching my copy." And he's like, "Oh, right." And I was just like, none of that would have flown when I was a kid. And I was like, "I'm happy to do this for you, but you don't understand the strife that went on to get to where we are now." I need that kudos for paving the way for you to watch Wild Things at,
Yeah, but you know what? It definitely went both ways. My family is full of these stories of my brother or my sister, especially my brother, using, "Oh, but I want to babysit Nathan for a little while," as an excuse to stay up later, do more things at night, all that sort of thing. So, there was a give and take here.
Sure.
Yeah, my parents, I could pretty much watch anything I wanted without supervision after 12, pretty much. Before that, I could watch anything I wanted with supervision. But yeah, pretty much after that, I was South Park, all the stuff.
Yeah, I definitely stayed up to watch South Park.
Yes.
I watched it on level 3 volume. I was about 4 inches from the CRT TV screen. So my parents wouldn't wake up while I was watching it. And that was basically the first 2 to 3 seasons of South Park for me.
Wow.
When they originally aired, too, just to, really further date myself. You would not believe, so, growing up, I was a huge fan of the band called Orgy. You would not believe the explanation that it took to my parents to allow me to buy a CD by a band called Orgy. Like,
did you ever make a PowerPoint for it?
no, both my parents are lawyers, so I mean, I was like in the middle of 12 Angry Men trying to convince the last two guys to do Not Guilty. I mean, it was brutal. All right, swinging it back around. So we've got Alfred Hitchcock directing. Supporting actress was Janet Leigh. Art direction, cinematography were both black and white. Just going to run down these real quick. AFI rankings, 100 greatest movies of all time. It's number 18. It went up to 14 when they revisited the list most recently. Number 1 on the greatest thrills movie. Film scores number 4. Greatest heroes and villains number 2. Greatest quotes number 56. As far as greatest quotes, did you guys feel like you brought anything away from this on quotes, Nathan?
Mainly that this is a really quotable movie in a lot of areas. Mm-hmm. And A Boy's Best Friend is His Mother I feel like it's an excerpt from a conversation that should be quoted in its whole for how creepy it is and how just the atmosphere is dripping, and every single line in that is, the sirens are in the distance. The sirens are blaring a little nearer. Now they're flashing in your face. Get out of here.
Pump the brakes.
This is one of those movies that I thought that if you watched it on mute with subtitles, it would be really amusing.
Yeah, that's so true. Without the music, which Hitchcock didn't even really want to begin with. He really wanted more like sound effects rather than the music. But the studio was like, no, we have to do music. And I think they made the right call.
Oh, yeah. I mean, iconic music. And to cover up a faux pas before, Nathan, was this the first time you'd seen it? Or what was your history with this?
This is the first time that I had seen this movie.
Whoa!
So This was a new experience for me, except for the fact that this is a movie that is so in the cultural zeitgeist that, unfortunately, some of these scenes, the big twist at the end of this movie was somewhat spoiled for me, and we're before the spoilers section here, so I won't say exactly what it was, but I will say that Russell and I, our other host, had a conversation about this beforehand, and we both watched it with having had different parts of the movie spoiled for us, and it was very funny to hear, I knew this was going to happen, but I had no idea this was going to happen, and it was the complete reverse.
That's really fun.
It is, and Russell's one of those people that, he is the most vocal about having movies ruined for him. Like, he was the guy in high school that was just like, no! So it is amusing to me at times when something gets blown out of the water for him, just because he takes it very, very seriously.
Yeah, and this movie has like iconic twists, so it's a shame that you didn't get to experience those to the maximum effect.
Yeah, there was one twist that I don't know if it would even be called a twist necessarily, except that because two characters look pretty similar, it was actually kind of shocking.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to call this a first-time watch for me. I've actually seen this movie twice before. Both times I did not pay it proper attention. Once was at a party, and the other time I believe I was in and out during I put it on as all right, I'm going to watch Psycho, and then didn't really stay conscious the whole time. So I'm going to call this a first-time watch for me. And what a great movie. I had super vague reminiscence of what happened. So I can't say it was completely spoiled, but I kind of got the gist of where they were angling for, whether it was due to someone ruining it for me in the past and just not really fully remembering it or what. But still incredibly enjoyable film. I mean, I think you could go in knowing exactly what happens, but not having seen it, and still have a really, really good time with this movie.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
So, anyway, I downloaded Peacock TV to watch this too, by the way. So here's a little plug for Peacock TV. Never heard of that before either, and I was like, all right, we'll give that a shot. All right, so, warning, spoilers lie ahead. We're going to be doing a very broad synopsis of Psycho. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, pause here. Watch the movie.
Welcome to the Flashback Flicks Retro Movie Podcast. I'm Ricky.
I'm Grayson.
And every week we review a movie from the past and reflect on things we missed, things we loved, and things we want to see again.
Yeah, because we believe any movie worth watching is worth watching again.
So if you like films, friendship, and a lot of callbacks,
I mean, just so many callbacks,
then subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever RSS feeds go for like-minded movie-loving individuals. Like you.
What happens when two modern film fans go back and rewatch all the old classic films from yesteryear to see if they hold up? You get the Classic Film Jerks podcast. Find the Classic Film Jerks podcast on all the major platforms.
And we're back. So we are about to do a plot summary for the movie Psycho. So if you've not seen this movie, this is your very last chance. Don't let us be that guy or girl that ruins it for you. Nathan, you want to roll it down?
I do, Brian. Marion Crane's jet-setting romance with her boyfriend Sam Loomis reaches a dead end when he reveals his debts. So when her employer sends her to the bank with $40,000 in cash, she makes a snap decision and instead drives night and day toward his home in California. Exhausted after a stressful encounter with a suspicious policeman, she finally stops to stay the night at a hotel where only the lost visit, the Bates Motel. There she meets the oh-so-friendly Norman Bates, who invites her for dinner over the objections of his mother, which Marion hears from the nearby Bates house. But later that night, Norman's mother appears and stabs Marion to death in a grisly murder. She returns to the house covered in blood, and Norman's voice rings out in surprise. He runs out and hides the body, the car, and the $40,000 in the bog. Sam, Marion's boss, and Marion's sister, Lila, have hired a private investigator to find her. The investigator goes door to door along her probable route and finally reach the hotel. Suspicious of Norman's mother, Detective Arbogast sneaks into the Bates house and starts up the stairs, but Mother Bates, suddenly spry, emerges and stabs out viciously, knocking him down to his death. After getting little help from the local sheriff, Sam and Lila go out to do their own investigating. Sam distracts Norman while Lila goes into the house. Mother Bates isn't in the bed, but she is in the basement. At least, her corpse is. Norman springs onto the scene dressed as his mother, knife in hand, but Sam overcomes him.
Excellent. Oh my gosh. This movie was so much. I love a movie that can go as far back as this one does and still have that, like, surprising nature to it.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
We're really in an age where I feel like it's hard to shock people. And, this movie is just, it's very timeless in that respect.
Yeah, and it really inspired so many modern fears that we have. Like the whole dying in the shower thing wasn't really a fear before this, but I mean, Vivien Leigh said that she never took another shower again. She only took baths after this film.
I feel like it would be harder to escape a bath.
I know, me too. I feel like you're standing up in a shower, so like you already have that advantage. I don't know, but
like
yeah,
I could see you never using a shower curtain again.
Yeah, I think that might be the. But yeah, so this movie is based off a novel by Robert Bloch, which is based on the crimes of Ed Gein, who I know a lot about because, unsurprisingly, I like true crime. But I really like how they really injected Ed Gein's spirit into Norman Bates, especially with the mother thing. Like the whole line of boy's best friend is his mother could have come straight from Ed Gein's head. Like his mother once said to him, "You dreadful child, only a mother could love you." You know, it really rings true.
You really worry about the writers of this kind of movie when they hit something so squarely on the head with these conversations, and it just feels exactly like something that would actually be happening, as opposed to something...
Yes.
I mean, I can think of so many, back to the sort of shower conversation, how many horror trailers have you watched, not to mention movies, that advertise as one of the biggest things, oh, there's a creepy shower scene, of course it's that. But I think a lot of what makes this movie amazing isn't the shocking over-the-top stuff like that, but the texture. a woman is driving in the rain with thoughts of how tangled her life is after a decision that she's been forced into has been made and she can't take it back. She hears the voices of people shouting, and it's literally just a shot over the dash of a car in the rain of someone's face just staring out into the distance. And yet it's the most riveting thing I can remember in many movies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's terrifying. And the music overlay over it just really, I think, hits it home. The entire thing, especially in the driving scenes, that music really is just timeless.
Yeah, this is a movie that Alfred Hitchcock did not initially want music for. And you can almost say that they went in a cheap route because it's just a string orchestra score.
It's just violins, yeah.
It's just orchestra, and yet the composer Bernard Herrmann manages to pull something out of that is iconic to this day. The shrieking strings, the incredible cello hits. How many film scores use that as it's almost like a modern thing that's having a renaissance now of having those all-string scores, getting those hits down there. Excellent job, Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah, I mean, The Exorcist just straight up plucked this soundtrack, I'm convinced. The entire walking scene in The Exorcist, I'm like, this is just the driving music from Psycho.
Yeah.
So just as a good place to plug in South Park again, Jane.
It's always a good.
Jane mentioned that she's a big fan of true crime. Nathan, where do you fall on informative murder porn?
I generally don't like it. I honestly am not a fan of it because either it's really depressing because it's just, oh my gosh, people are doing something stupid and people are horrible. But in this case, there's so much style and so much, it's over the top enough that kind of reaction doesn't jump out at me. And I love this.
I feel like I could play the game, but it's just not one of my favorites. And what I mean by that is I don't go and seek out true crime stuff all that often, but every once in a while something does suck me in. Like Mindhunters on Netflix was excellent. I recently read a couple, one's actually a world history book, but it's still basically true crime. Is called Say Nothing, about the IRA. Ooh. And the other one was Killers of the Flower Moon, about the first
So I have an interesting story about Killers of the Flower Moon. So I'm from Ramona, Oklahoma originally, which is about 10-minute drive away from where those murders happened, and the murderers, Ernest Burkhart, is my great uncle.
Wow.
So his sister is my great grandmother. And I'm going to see the movie set tomorrow, I think. Yeah, I'm going to see the movie set and check everything out, so I'm really excited. But yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
Wow.
The connection.
Yeah. I know, and Leonardo DiCaprio is playing my great uncle. Like, that's his role.
Just so you guys know, listeners, that was not set up ahead of time.
No, not at all.
That was literally, that was not scripted. That was me like, oh, I brought this. Oh, all right. So do you get to meet DiCaprio, or is it going to be like a meet and greet? You
no, I don't think so. Hand? I think I'm just going to go there and check it out.
Okay.
But, I mean, if I spot him, I'll definitely let him know.
Okay. Excellent. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a little bit about the plot of this movie. So we've got embezzlement leading to murder, and then additional murder. So it seems to be one of those you get what's coming to you sort of movies. Do you watch this as a warning piece on stealing from your boss? Nathan?
I don't know. I think it's more a warning piece on don't drive too late at night. I mean, on my drive back into the Philadelphia area that I just took, I started fairly late in the day and was definitely getting a little bit tired towards the end, but this is definitely the kind of movie that keeps you on your toes when you're driving. Just, oh, no, let's not stop here.
Yeah, I actually think this movie was anti-motel propaganda.
All right, so that leads me to my next question. Have either of you ever stayed at a psycho motel? Jane? A
psycho motel? I've certainly stayed at a motel. I haven't really had...
But I mean, one where you're like, okay, I'm 30% chance of being murdered.
Yeah, I would say so. And I'm trying to remember where. I think it was in, I think it was in Eureka Springs. Little bit murdery, but that's okay. It was really cheap.
Yeah, I've absolutely stayed in a motel that was sort of where my middle school science Olympiad team would stay for the state competition out in Juniata area. That, if not for the fact that the rest of the team was there, oh my gosh. Old wood panel walls, the decor that hasn't been updated since like maybe the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
This is the kind of place that you just kind of wonder, who are these people who run this place?
Yeah.
Where is Eureka Springs?
That's in Arkansas.
Oh, that's a good place for murder.
I would think so. That's
the appropriate place for a motel.
A lot of taxidermy. Lot of taxidermy. That was really what set. I was like, yeah.
I do feel like after this movie came out, like they should have nixed taxidermy in motels. Like,
I think that's the line in the sand.
Like, perhaps we should rethink our decorating. You know, this guy who owns this motel goes out and sees this movie and it's like, oh man, I gotta take it all down now.
You know, that's the one thing. So in reference to what I said earlier about having been spoiled, I knew that Norman's mother was dead and that he'd been playing her from the beginning.
Yeah.
I knew that from basically some movie show showing that as a great moment in cinema and like of the spinning the chair around. So it was kind of fuzzy in my head. So my assumption was that the reason that he got into taxidermy was so that he could be a like good taxidermist of his mother. But man, he's really good with the birds, but not so good with the people.
Yeah, he didn't really do anything to her, I don't think. That's a good thought, though. I mean, I've seen Bates Motel, which isn't that great, and it's obviously like the prequel or whatever. It's not great. And he just gets into it because he likes taxidermy and that. But I mean, that's an interesting thought. I think he just is lonely.
Make your own friends.
Yeah, and I mean, also, it's obviously playing on Ed Gein's whole thing where he actually, skin people and stuff. So I think it's kind of also a play on that a little bit of him kind of playing God a little bit.
Yeah, it is absolutely one of those activities that if you're doing that, you are walking a line in which many people are going to look askance at you.
Yeah, and I have a taxidermy bobcat in my living room because my parents gave it to me as a gift when I was a kid. And it's like baring its teeth. It's pretty freaky.
I always wanted Rowdy from Scrubs. Like, just to mess with people. Like, I just wanted a, taxidermy dog that you just put out in front of doors to startle people. Like, that was one of my favorite recurring gags in Scrubs.
And then you're in the room with horror movie fans and they say, hey, what about that scene from Cabin in the Woods?
Oh my gosh, stop.
I also love that movie dearly. It's
one of my favorite. It's probably in my top 5 for sure. It's a perfect movie, in my opinion.
I think that is my favorite horror movie.
Oh, it's genius. I love it so much. They actually put like sugar on the wolf's teeth so she could make out with it without throwing up. Alice and I did an episode on that a little bit ago, and yeah, there's some interesting facts. Another interesting fact about that movie is that Marty, the reason he's always wearing baggy clothes is because he was more ripped than Chris Hemsworth at the time.
Ooh, can't be that.
Exactly. Chris Hemsworth's the jock. You can't be more buff than him.
Excellent. How do we feel about the cast and the acting in this movie? Nathan?
This leads me to my second thing that was the part that surprised me in this movie, where Russell, obviously, I knew that the shower scene existed and happened, but I wasn't entirely sure that this person died. Because Marion and Lila, the actors who play them, look like sisters, look really close. So, Since this is the first time I'd actually watched this movie, in my head I was thinking, so this person obviously survives to the end of the movie and is able to turn around the mother in the chair. So then she's getting stabbed a bunch of times, and I'm thinking, wow, this is a really robotic, weird stabbing motion. Does she, run away and have a bunch of stab wounds? But how is she able to just, stand up and do this? This is really unrealistic. And then she falls over and dies, and I'm thinking, wait, huh? Does her ghost come up and turn the mother around in the chair? Oh, there's a sister. But in all seriousness, as I alluded to earlier, this is a movie that is not just the campy moments. It's not just the over-the-top stuff. There are so many scenes in this movie that are made amazing by just the widening of people's eyes and the stillness of their expressions while they're listening to somebody totally creep them out and various things. It's great.
I think this movie really, the whole vibe, I think, really hinges on Anthony Perkins being as handsome as he is. I don't really know if it would work as well of him being like the boy next door, like type of vibe if he wasn't so cute. I have a little interesting fact about the casting of Anthony Perkins. I guess him and Hitchcock would make prank calls to like producers and stuff. And at one point, Perkins did a woman's voice, and Hitchcock was like, "That is the perfect voice for Norma Bates."
No!
And they put it in.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
So funny. I really like the woman who plays Marion Crane, Janet Leigh. How she really plays this female character in like the 50s in a way that she's kind of standoffish, which wasn't really the norm back then. She's kind of rigid even before she takes the money with the billionaire or whatever. And Hitchcock was really good about that, really writing and giving meaty roles to women who weren't really getting those parts back then.
This is a great role. Like I said, I was so surprised because she controls this movie. She owns it for the first half. Yes. She is the character. You get so many scenes of her doing all of her hijinks to escape that police officer, the man with the face like a slab of marble.
Yes. Hitchcock hated cops.
I would never have guessed.
In every one of his movies, he hates them.
He must have also been slightly terrified of them because...
Yeah, I think he plays into his own phobias a lot in his films.
Yes, because this captures phobia of being followed by a police officer so well.
So well, it's terrifying.
One of the things I thought about this movie, I was like, if I got followed by a cop for that long in that way, what do you call the cops? Like,
yeah, right.
Like when she was trading her car in, which, I mean, obviously she couldn't do anything else more suspicious than she did the entire time she was being followed by that cop. But I'm just trying to think, like, what do you do?
Like through a state, pretty much, he follows her.
Like, that's like, it's a high level. It's a very, very high level.
There are some policemen in this movie, policemen and private investigator, who go above and beyond their gumshoe calling in order to follow people. Mm-hmm. How many hotels and motels must Arbogast have gone through in order to find the Bates Motel? Because he starts in a city.
It's so off the road.
We know that she's driven night and day for a while. How many must he have passed and gone to?
Yeah, and this one cop is like, I'm going to follow this one woman who might be acting suspiciously for 100 miles.
Yeah, she was acting like really surprised and creeped out when I woke her up in her car in the middle of the day.
Yes.
No one acts awkward after that.
Definitely. That's not
all.
A situation you act weird in.
Definitely not. Do we have any other thoughts on our cast here? I kind of enjoyed the sheriff. Just reminded me of that same kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering if that was like the start of all sheriffs and or authority figures have to be somewhat like this guy.
Yeah, did he start that trend?
Right.
I think the psychologist is just the most ridiculous thing.
Oh yeah,
he's so insane. So was he insane? Yes. And no. And I'm like, oh my god, shut up. So annoying.
We have entered Shakespeare in the Park all of a sudden, but I'm not sure if it's the actor being bad or that the actual character is just a psychologist who really enjoys his job too much.
Yes, he's like, I have been waiting for one of these guys for so long.
But yeah, R. Lee Emery is the guy I was trying to think of. He was the drill sergeant in Full Metal Jacket, and I just felt like the sheriff in the end just really, really reminded me of him, and I'm just wondering if that was where like that small town sheriff vibe came from.
Yeah.
All right, so on our film creation here, how are we feeling about Alfred Hitchcock? Jane?
So he wasn't like the nicest person ever. Obviously, I guess we come to expect that from male auteurs. Kubrick, that kind of thing. He obviously like really tortured one of his female stars, Tippi Hedren, in particular on the birds. But he obviously was a genius, kind of undeniably. The production was a little irregularly dramatic because of the content, because this was so groundbreaking, and so people called it like smut. People thought it was disgusting. With the murder, with the guy dressed up as a woman, which I'm like, that's the least of this. These are the least of the problems. That's not even a problem. So the production, Hitchcock had a contract with Paramount that he would produce all his movies with them, but they read the script for Psycho and they said it was disgusting and that it would tarnish the Paramount name. So they refused to produce it. So Hitchcock had to basically pay for it out of pocket and go to Universal and have them produce it for him. So he was really, really passionate about this film being made.
Nothing like going across the street on a company.
Yeah, right.
Nathan, how did you feel about him?
Yeah, what's it got to be like when you go from a color film back to black and white, and you're on the cusp of things? Because previously he'd been working on North by Northwest. But what can't you say about the directing of this movie? There are just too many scenes to pull out to note that this is one of these movies with a simple plot that it's all in the texture. That there are these scenes that have no text. There's no actual script at all. It's just someone packing up her wardrobe to go on a trip. Mm-hmm. And she keeps on looking over at this envelope on the bed with a lot of money in it. And the music is just keeping you on edge the whole time.
Have you guys ever played the game, Is It Churchill or Hitchcock?
No. What is that?
Please describe.
So basically, like, you'd randomly send a picture to a friend of yours, and the question's always, is it Churchill or Hitchcock? Because
they look alike,
they look very similar to one another. Yeah,
that's fun.
So, anyway,
yeah, Hitchcock was like really, really like a control freak, major control freak, really heavily involved in writing, costuming, everything that really a director wasn't known for being super involved in yet. But one of my favorite facts about him and Psycho is the lengths he went to preserve his integrity of the midpoint and the final twists. He sent his assistants out to all the largest bookstores in the country to buy out all the copies of Psycho, the novel. He also had cutouts of himself telling the audience not to spoil the movie and to not come into the film late, because it was very common back then for people to just come into the movie at any time, even if it had was almost over. But he was like, you have to watch it from the beginning or you're not getting in. And some movie theaters wouldn't even like show the movie because of that. They thought it would hurt their sales. And he also did something really different for this movie with critics. Usually critics back in the day would get early viewings, and so they could write critiques about it. But he said that no, they have to see it with everyone else. And so then they gave him bad reviews when it came out because they were mad.
The plot thickens. Brian, if someone walked into your bookstore and said, hey, I want all these copies, what would you do?
Well, I'm a capitalist at heart, so generally I would say, here you go.
And how quickly would they reappear on the shelves?
Well, I mean, probably fairly quickly. We're really, really sensitive to pop culture trends these days. Like, I spend a lot of my time just shortlisting in stuff that's new Netflix series or yada yada, which is funny because I am so thoroughly against movie and TV covers for books and the little dot you find sometimes.
Agreed.
Now a show on Netflix. Like, it is a besmirchment. And I can't stand it. But sometimes that's all you can get, and you got to give the people what they want. I will say this, that the only thing that kind of did give me a little red light here is we have gotten to the point now where we do deny over the phone mail orders for multiple copies of books because of resellers. So for instance, manga has become a really, really popular thing in North America, and we will have people who find out that we have, a copy of something, and they'll call and they'll say, hey, can you send me a copy of this? We say yes, and they're like, so how many do you have? And they will do that to then resell them on sites like eBay for 2 and 3 times the price. So we will not do that. Just listeners out there, don't be harassing your local Barnes & Noble for resale stuff.
Well, it sounds like someone had a very interesting traveling summer internship to buy a bunch of books.
Right. Hey, I want you to go around everywhere. I'm sure back then people would be like, all right.
Yeah, sure. I mean, okay. And also Hitchcock was the type of guy who would like literally have a bottle of wine flown in from France to a movie set. Like he was just that type of guy.
That tracks.
No, totally, I get it. I mean, never would I ever, but still.
Yeah, right.
All right, so he also directed this movie. Do we have any special feelings on the way this movie was put together and directed?
So he was really stood firm on his beliefs of what the movie should be, even though a lot of people were like, no, you can't do that. You can't show a toilet on screen. That's not okay. It's never been done before. It's gross. It's never going to happen. And he was like, no, we're going to do it. So like, I don't know what you're complaining about. But I really found it interesting. He broke a lot of levels, a lot of boundaries with this movie. Obviously, the nudity and the knife penetration that had never been seen before. Oh no! It couldn't make it past the censors. So Hitchcock had already fought to keep the shot of the flushing toilet in, but he wanted the scene the way he wanted it, and so he had Janet Leigh. He wanted her to do it nude, but she was like, "No, I'm not doing that." So she dressed in a full body skin suit, and then they had a model doing the other nude scenes. If you pause it at certain points, you can see a nipple and knife penetration. And I guess when Hitchcock sent that to the censors, they were like, they couldn't agree whether there was nudity or not. And so they sent it back to him and was like, you need to fix the nudity. And he took it out and was like, okay. And he didn't do anything to it and sent it back, and it got approved. So, yeah, he was like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. And he just sent it back, and they were like, oh, yeah, that he took it out. But he didn't do anything to it.
Well played, salesman.
Yes.
So, obviously, Hitchcock has a plethora of work. Where do you put this in ranking his work? Is this the best? Is it, mid-tier? Where are we putting Psycho?
I would think, it's obviously it is his most well-known. It's his most famous. I love it, but I think I would say that I have other favorites that I think are a little creepier in a lot of ways. Like I really like Strangers on a Train. That's probably my favorite Hitchcock movie. It's about these guys who meet on a train, and this guy talks about how annoying his wife is, and then the guy tries to murder her. It's really, really scary. And but I think obviously this is easily in his top 5 out of his 50.
How do you feel about it, Nathan? I
agree. This has got to rank pretty high. It doesn't have the architectural wonderfulness of his previous film, North by Northwest, but It's, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Now, this is an incredibly atmospheric movie. Everything about it is, about expressing that suspense. So let's talk a little bit. We'll go into set design and that sort of thing, but locationally, like, how does this movie make you feel, Nathan?
On edge. I think that's my main takeaway from this movie, is that the entire movie is spent just feeling like your teeth have to be clamped against one another to deal with either the psychological just pain and desperation that it starts out with, to the scenes when various people are flirting with Marion against her will, and then later on just feeling like she's at risk of falling asleep at the wheel and getting into an accident during various things. It's amazing how well, between both the directing, the sound design, and the score, because, I can laud the score and call out how great it is, but honestly, the sound design also has to be brought up here too, because there is so much good work there that works all to keep you just on edge, so that when those shock moments come, you're ready for them, and it feels great.
Yeah, and
excellent,
Hitchcock worked so hard on the sound design. He tried out, I think, 50 plus fruits and vegetables, stabbing them to see which would make the most satisfying sound for the shower scene. And he landed on a cassava melon.
That sounds like a fun day.
Yeah. He just stabbed a bunch of fruit. It was like Fruit Ninja in the 50s or in the 60s.
So he was his own Foley artist.
I really hope that was in some way, shape, or form the inspiration behind Fruit Ninja.
Yeah, I hope so.
Does that mean, Brian, that you think there's a
Hitchcock.
video out there of Alfred Hitchcock fruit ninja-ing things in the air? Maybe.
I mean, I don't know if I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but if I could have one job in Hollywood, I mean, like just for fun, I would love to be a sound effects person. Like that just seems like a blast. Like that, I would just like, oh, honey, what did you do? Or what did you do today? I stabbed 150 different fruits.
Yes.
Like, sweet. Like, or be that guy is like driving by a train tracks or something. The train is like hitting a cardboard pallet or something that's sitting along the side, and it's making something that sounds like great gunfire, and you have to pull over really quick and grab your phone and run up to it and hit record and hope you get enough of it to splice it together and be like, dude, I've got the next machine gun, the next great machine gun sound. Like, this is going to be awesome.
Have you ever
had
the urge to actually go and record something that you had that you were encountering in real life almost?
Yes, it wasn't really, wasn't thinking about a sound effect though. It just seemed like it was this eerie noise. I was in downtown Spokane. They were doing a street cleaning around the holidays. And I guess a ball from the tree had gotten in the street and it was stuck in one of the brushes and it was making this like, and it was the creepiest noise I've ever heard. And I was like, should I record it or are people just going to look at me funny? But anyway, I was like really getting into it. My wife's like, you're an insane person. And yeah, so.
Hitchcock was also really super attentive to costumes. He would take his leading ladies out and like hand pick all of their costumes himself, and they would try them on and everything. And I really liked how they played with the black and white in this film, especially with the costumes. For instance, you'll notice that in the very first scene in the hotel, Marion's wearing a white underwear, but in the scene after, she's also wearing a white outfit before she decides to steal the money. But then after, we exclusively see her in black underwear and gray and black tones. So that kind of signifies her moral change, right? Which I think was really interesting. I wrote a whole paper in college about the colors in this movie and how he used the black and white.
So how about the lighting? They do a lot of interesting things. It's not like full on like noir where they're just doing eyes, but I do feel like they light faces in very specific ways. Especially with how iconic the house is with just the lights on. And it's that almost static dark shape, but the windows really make it a thing. Yeah, like the light up sign for the Bait Hotel. I feel like they do a lot of interesting things in this movie with lights. How are we feeling about that, Jane?
Yeah, I specifically, the shadows in the scene where they're eating dinner are just spectacular. Like the shadows of the birds, Norman's shadow, like kind of going over Marion, kind of dominating her a little bit. It's really, really cool. All the stuff that he does with shadows, and you kind of have to do that with a black and white film. And also the lighting for the car scene is great. It really kind of evokes that anxiety of driving at night really, really well.
Yeah, I don't know how she could see it all in that car.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's pretty dangerous. There's like not a road and just, random blobs of light heading at you. Yeah. You should probably pull over at that point.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And who can forget the use of just those creepy lights for the Bates house? Oh yeah. The windows ominously staring at you all the time.
Yeah, they're like eyes.
I do feel like there was some use of that or reuse of that same mechanism in I'm going to blank on the name of it. I just had it 2 seconds ago, but it's a Stephen King novel about vampires.
Salem's Lot.
Salem's Lot. Yeah, Salem's Lot. So I do feel like there was some reuse of that technique later on.
Also, the scene where he's looking through the peephole is so freaky. That's a great use of light where it's like just shining on his pupil. Ooh, so freaky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. Now this has got a fairly iconic score. Let's talk a little bit about how the music sets the mood or assists the mood of everything is creepy.
So just to start, we've had the conversation on this podcast before that we think that the film overture is a lost art that needs to come back. And this movie is just one of so many that makes the argument that it's got to come back, because this starts off in a way to immediately set you off. And it almost feels a little shocking when all of a sudden it transitions out of it and you end up in the bright light of day. And the score does ease off a little bit, but it still just leaves you with this teeth-chattering feeling, even when you end up in a fairly romantic scene immediately afterwards. And, of course, lighting-wise, it then continues selling that mood until Marion makes her decision. But, again, this score is great.
Yeah, and one of Hitchcock's whole deals was he really wanted to make the overture, the intro scene, a part of the film. So that entire thing with the lines, and it's everything's fast and everything's choppy, kind of like how we see later in the shower scene that had never been done before, that choppy shot after shot. So that really, I think that overture scene, they kind of play that same foreboding music, and it's hinting at the screaming violins later on, and then it's kind of satisfying and terrifying whenever you see the culmination of that in the shower scene.
Yeah, and there are some scenes that do indeed have the music back off a little bit, and I think that the balance of those two things, this is not to say that you need to have music all the time in your movies. I think that having the music be successful in some of these areas really allows you to have some of these scenes when you're walking uncomfortably through a house and it's all dead silence and house noises.
And then it's
and then it just primes you to be ready for those extreme shock moments. It's great. It's really great. I really got to hand it to, once again, Bernard Herrmann, the composer for this film. Excellent job.
All right, guys. So are we ready to hand out some superlatives for Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho?
I think we are, Brian.
Yes.
Excellent. My favorite part. I hope it's yours too. All right. So who is your MVP, Jane?
I'd probably say Hitchcock. He was, super controlling, and that made this movie what it was, as with all of his movies, because he just would not let up.
Nathan?
You see, I'm not a hoarder of my superlatives. I've given him lots of praise tonight. Bernard Herrmann, once again.
I actually went with Anthony Perkins on this one. I don't think I've ever seen someone do a better job of being like the jovial guy next door / murderer.
Yeah.
That transition is fairly startling in this, and I think that this is probably one of the better movies that thins off guesswork on what the twist is going to be. Like, it's old enough now that, yeah, you've probably had it ruined for you at some point in time, but man, I would not have called it, the way it was if I hadn't known something was up. All right, what's your best supporting actor, Nathan?
Detective Milton Arbogast. He is he's a great name, and this is another one where the connection also helps it for me. In addition to his hilariously hapless navigation of figuring all this out with his gumshoe nature and his dogged pursuit of everything, he does a really great job. Has an amazing death scene, but also just the name of this character, I gotta say, as someone who wants to find an excuse to put The Expanse show and books into every single episode that he's on, there's a ship called the Arbogast, and I really hope that this is the source of that name.
Excellent. I too am a great fan of both books and show. I'm going to go with John McIntire with mine, just because I really did enjoy the sheriff in this. And it was a small part, but his kind of execution and really bringing the plot twist to fruition was it was a lot of fun. I really liked him. And I figured no one had picked him, so I went for the windows on this one. Jane, what's yours?
I don't think most enjoyable. I would find The Psychologist. Just grade A community theater acting. Cannot get enough.
Simon Oakland.
Once again, I ask, but is it the actor or the character who is a terrible over-the-top actor?
Can you tell? Were they trying to do like the classic 1960s example of the psychologist, like the, oh, yes or no, that's both.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've discovered the answer.
Yes.
All right, guys. I see I work one in there. What is, so we got some hidden gems. What's your hidden gem, Nathan?
My hidden gem, and it's not really all that hidden, it's in the full view a lot of the time, is just how awful that motel is. You see the house, and it's what is now perceived today as the most amazing horror house. This is really the fundamental, it's got everything. But the motel itself, when you finally get a wider shot of it, you really wonder, so did Hitchcock just find this on the side of the road, unoccupied and vacant, and it's just like a shed?
I believe they built it.
It is so disturbing feeling. The fact that it is able to be used so effectively, though, despite how just awful it looks as a set and as a place, it ends up with so much lighting. Yeah, it ends up with so much character by the end, where you see, oh, this is how the rooms are connected. This is the architectural way that these things work. Norman has put her in room 1 because he wants her next to him so he can use the creepy peepholes. And by the end of it, you really get a sense that not just the house, but the motel itself has a great character to it. So that is my hidden gem.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Jane?
My hidden gem would probably be at the beginning. The woman who plays Marian's coworker is actually Alfred Hitchcock's daughter, Patricia Hitchcock. I love her little scene where she does, oh, he was flirting with you. He must have noticed my wedding ring. And I'm like, okay, a little presumptuous, aren't we? I just think that's so funny.
It could also be that she's way hotter than you.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, I think that she's just like a bombshell and you look like your dad. No offense, but like, ooh.
Yeah, I definitely had that thought watching that scene.
So he doesn't want to flirt with Winston Churchill, you're saying?
Yeah.
I'd party with Winston. at those English pubs that go all night.
He could go hard.
I went with the first toilet flush in cinematic history as my hidden gem on this.
Yeah.
When I read that, I was like, that's perfect. Thank you for that. All right, so we're going to recast some people, and sometimes in movies this is blasphemy, and others it's necessary. So, Nathan, who are you recasting for Psycho?
You know, this is one of those movies where it's mostly blasphemy, so I'm going to bring up a more comedic one. So, one of the only things that I'll rag on this movie for is that the voices of Norman and his mother emerging from the house are so over the top and ridiculous sounding that
shut up.
You know, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
funny.
Norman definitely comes off worse in a lot of those areas. But you know what? You might as well take it all the way. So I'm going to bring up Carol Kane, who is Miracle Max's wife in The Princess Bride, because I just want to hear someone yelling, Humperdinck, 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 out of that house, because that's about as ridiculous as I thought that was.
Excellent. And Jane, are you recasting anyone?
I don't know who I would recast him as, but I think Sam, the guy who plays Sam, her boyfriend, is just kind of a brick. I don't think he really has much...
House?
A brick house.
See a brick house?
House. He especially in the beginning scene, he just doesn't really seem like he's that interested in Marion, and even like Hitch had to give the direction to Vivien Leigh, like, you need to take this into your own hands because he's not going to do anything.
Come on, we could meet again for lunch.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, my recast on this is also kind of silly, but it's also kind of in line with Jane's. I do think John Gavin could be recast, and I went silly with it. I'd like to see Elvis play that part.
That'd be hilarious.
So I'm plugging Elvis in for John Gavin. I think it would probably ruin the movie, but at the same time, I'm also think it would be my.
I mean, maybe
this is back before you could have, or he probably wouldn't have done it as comedic relief, and this is back before comedic relief was necessarily a thing. But I just that amused me, that thought. All right. So, what is your best shot, Jane?
Best shot. I would have to say,
Or stab.
I love Norman and Marion's conversation. I think that entire scene is just wonderful, but especially the scene where she said maybe you could put her somewhere, and Norman like gets those big eyes, and like they have that kind of lower straight on shot of his face. Really, really freaky.
Excellent. Nathan.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Jane. That moment in that scene is such a turning point. Like, sure, a boy's best friend and his mother line is famous and all that, but that is such a great shot and a turning point. My favorite shot in this movie is actually when Detective Arbogast gets got, and he's walking up the stairs, and all of a sudden the camera is doing this really wonky zoom out while panning backwards, while doing all sorts of things, and then Norman's mother appears, stabs him, and he falls back down the steps, and it just zooms back in and follows him on the way down, and it's so psychedelic almost. It's so mysterious feeling, and it gives this real sense of almost otherworldly mystery. What is going on with the mother? Is she a ghost? So that will be my best shot.
So for my best shot, I went with, there's a point in time after she's been stabbed, and they've got this like slow pan out of her face laying on the tile floor. I thought that was one of the scariest, eeriest shots I've ever seen, like, period. And I couldn't get over that. Even at the end of the movie, I was like thinking about, even at the end.
Unbeknownst to you, Jane, that's actually our foul language buzzer.
Yeah, that would have been great if I could just time that up right. But even toward the end of the movie, that still like just hung with me.
Yeah, and there's an interesting fact about that. Like, the movie was done, it was in the can, it was finished, and then Hitch showed it to his wife Alma, who's like a pretty consistent collaborator of his, and she was like, she blinked. And he was like, no, she didn't. We went over it like countless times, and they went over it, and she did. And so they had to change. They just like cut that out at the very last minute.
Excellent. All right, so we're on to best scene. So what is your best scene, Nathan?
There are so many iconic scenes in this movie, and I could call out any one of them as this, and I think that would be great. But I'm gonna try for something a little bit more unusual here, something a little bit more out of the way and earlier in the movie. I think the coolest scene for me is actually when Marion is in her own room in the city, and she's got the envelope on the bed, and she's packing, and the envelope is pulling the camera and her eyes to it like gravity. And the score is chugging along, just giving you the sense that she is so tempted, and she's inevitably going to fall prey to the temptation of this envelope of so much money just sitting there open with the bills sticking out. And it's amazing. There's no words, there's nothing but the amazing direction of it. So that is my best scene.
Excellent. Jane, how about you?
I would still say the conversation scene between Marion and Norman, just because I think it really, and again, Hitchcock is so good at directing scenes that kind of feel real for women, like that scene of feeling you're in a room with a weird guy that you're getting weird vibes from, but you don't want to be rude and you don't want to set him off, but then he kind of starts getting weirder and weirder, and I think that scene really captures that really awkward place that she's in. Even the scene where she's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that, and then he's like, well, what would you know? And it's just very scary in a very human type way.
No, you're right. That was an excellent scene. I actually went with something that's probably not even on a top 10 list for best scenes, but I liked it because it added a layer of deception to the film, was Norman carrying, air quotes, his mother down the steps, because at that point you're like, oh, there's no mother, but then you're like, oh, there is a mother. Like, what will this end up being? So it added a false positive on whether or not Norman Bates' mother actually existed, and I loved that mechanism.
Yeah, that's a great scene.
Do we have a best wardrobe or makeup moment?
The brows, Marion's brows are just the most, they're just perfection. Brow goals, honestly. Just every time I look at her face, I'm like, wow, look at those eyebrows. Incredible.
I am not a fan of the hairstyle though.
Yeah.
Like the sister was in a much better place.
Yeah.
I did find myself like wondering if John, Gavin, and the sister got together in the end.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of weirdly set you up for that.
Like,
Well, I don't know.
clear-
I think
he's available
Hitchcock
now.
did this pretty straight and narrow here. I don't think he played that up at all, which I really respect, because a lot of movies, that's the inevitable conclusion. You look like your sister.
Sure.
I dated your sister. You look like her. Well, let's just, do the natural thing.
I know we haven't met yet, but I feel like we have, so we should probably just get together. Nathan, do you have a change one thing?
I do. Once again, I'm going to call out how silly I thought the voices coming from the house were. And I think that this is something that if you change it away from being a motel and to something where maybe the house and the spare room are actually one and the same. So if you change this movie to the point that she falls asleep on the road and wakes up by a house and a kind, considerate stranger walks out and sees this poor woman passed out in her car. He's so kind, he invites her in, and, I have a spare room on the first floor that you can stay in. I think that there's a lot of things in this movie that get a little bit more effective. You can have a conversation with the mother a little bit more easily, in which it can just be softly overheard words from directly the floor above, just with thin walls or something, and it can be a lot less ridiculous. I think you could even have some sort of interplay with using set sound, like they're just walking around upstairs, and maybe Norman does something weird where he steps twice to imitate as if the mother was with him in the room. There could be so many things that maybe could lead clues if, instead of a motel, it was just one creepy house.
I do think that you lose some, like, just my opinion on this. I hear what you're saying, and yes, that would fix some issues, but I don't feel like, let's say it was a motel, but the office had living quarters attached to it.
That's what I was thinking, because when you stay in a hotel, there's a presumption of safety rather than staying in a stranger's
right.
home.
And I don't think you could have this movie without the house or the motel. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like both occupy a significant part in this. But yes, I completely agree with you. The fact that she could, quote, hear what they were saying from up the hill during the rain that he didn't hear her pull up in, like, it was a little weak. Yeah. But I feel like I can let that go because of the importance of both buildings.
Yeah, I can totally see that argument, and I do agree that this movie, the idea of the Bates Motel, is now so grounded in our cultural upbringings and pop culture that taking it out would be to change a huge monolith of movies.
It is definitely something that took me out of the movie thinking, how the hell does she hear this?
You should watch The Lodger. It's one of Hitchcock's early silent films, and it kind of plays with that. It's a real precursor to Psycho, and it's a lodger, a guy who comes and lives in the house, and they think he might be a murderer. So that kind of plays with that theme, which is pretty cool. So you should watch that.
Cool. I should check that out.
Excellent. What would you change, Jane?
I don't really buy that Norman would kill his mother, even if he was jealous. I think that, he loved her to death. And even if you go by, like, what this is based on, Ed Gein, he didn't kill his mother. His mother died from a brain aneurysm because she got so mad that their neighbor was having a girlfriend out of wedlock. Like, she just got so mad about it that she died. In classic Augusta Gein fashion. And so yeah, I guess I get it, because you want him to be like a murderer already. Like, you don't want him to just fly into murder with Marion, and it makes it creepier that he killed his mom and kept her there. But I think that isn't really conducive to what I think Norman is.
Do you think that he was acting and he tricked the psychologist?
Ooh, that's a good point. Ed Gein certainly was not. I mean, I think that it's definitely possible for Norman to be doing that. But also, I mean, the last scene, whenever he's doing the voiceover in his head, I think that kind of speaks to the fact that maybe he is actually insane.
He wouldn't even hurt a fly.
Yeah, so freaky.
Best quote, Jane.
We're all caught in our own personal in our own private traps. That's my favorite, always has been. It's a great, great quote, and I think it gets slept on.
Excellent choice. Nathan?
Oh, this is going to be a funny one where, once again, I just love everything to do with Detective Arbogast, and he has an exchange with Norman that is just so funny because he's trying to pry into Norman's day-to-day, and Norman's trying to get him away, and so when Detective Arbogast says, "Oh, you're doing the laundry in each room, I'll follow you around and inspect each room," and Norman just says, "Oh, come with me. You can help me change the beds." And Arbogast just says, "Oh, no, thank you," in this really hilarious way. Just great exchange.
Savage.
I'm good. I always like the quote, "We're always quickest to doubt people who have a reputation for being honest."
Ah, that's a good one.
So, yeah, I went with that. All right. Well, Jane, you want to give us a plug for your podcast and tell our listeners why we need to tune in?
Yeah, so you can listen to the Flick Chicks wherever you get your podcasts. If you liked me, but you thought I wasn't confrontational enough or vocal enough, you should go check out our podcast, because my co-host Allison is very funny and very knowledgeable, and I think we have a great time, and we hope you guys come and have a great time with us too.
I can definitely get with
Excellent.
that. I have listened through a bunch of episodes of the Flick Chicks podcast, and it is a lot of fun. And
yeah, that's the goal.
You guys definitely have done a lot of horror movies. So,
oh, we love horror. It's our fave.
And now we maybe have some background as to why.
Origin story, perhaps?
Yes.
Excellent. So on a scale of 0, because I know there's going to be a lot of those on this one, to 5 stars, what are you rating Psycho, Nathan?
Hey, this is a 4.5. There were a lot of moments in this movie where it was riveting. And not even because it was scary riveting, it was just intense, and the score was going, and I'm such a sucker for great, crazy, overarching soundtracks, and this is one of them. The direction is amazing. This is a fantastic movie.
Excellent. Jane?
Yeah, I give it a 5 out of 5. I think it's just a masterpiece. It influenced film in ways that I think you could write hundreds of papers on. Really, really interesting stuff, and made a huge impact in censorship laws and censorship in movies, which obviously we are very thankful for now.
Excellent. I also gave it 5 stars. I don't do this very often, but what a film, guys. If you have not seen, if you're still listening and you haven't seen it, shame on you. But if you haven't seen it and you listened anyway, go back and watch it. This movie's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. It's truly one of the best. So Nathan, you want to help me pick a movie for next time?
I do indeed, Brian.
Awesome. All right. So, option number 1, Dragon Lord, 1982. The adventures of a restless martial arts student called Dragon, who, while constantly pursuing a girl, gets involved in the affairs of a gang of thieves. Option 2, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. A young Chinese warrior steals a sword from a famed swordsman, then escapes into the world of romantic adventure with a mysterious man in the frontier of a nation. Option 3, Enter the Dragon, 1973. A secret agent comes to an opium lord's island fortress with other fighters for a martial arts tournament. What you got?
I think we're going to have to do Enter the Dragon, option 3 from 1973. Going to be a good time.
Excellent choice. Well, listen, Jane, thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really enjoyed it. And thank you to all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a like on Facebook, or even better, a comment on whichever podcast or casts you've listened to. Follow us on Twitter at movie_retro, and email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Producing and providing this podcast is fun but not free, so we invite you to support the show on our Patreon page, and that's patreon.com/retromovieroundtable. Any contribution is appreciated and will go toward making the show better for you, the listener. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Who showed you these? I learned it from watching you!